The night my daughter looked me in the eye and said, "We don't need your pennies anymore." I swear the floor shifted under my feet. She thought $35 million meant she could erase me, the man who raised her, who worked overtime shifts and patched leaky roofs so she could sleep with the heat on in winter. Her husband stood there smirking, already counting money that wasn't his, acting like I was just another bill they didn't want to pay. And me? I wasn't angry. I was stunned. Because the truth they didn't realize yet was simple. That ticket, the one worth $35 million, the one they thought gave them power, had my name printed on it. Mine. Before I take you through how I went from being thrown out of my own home to holding the line against betrayal, do me a favor. Drop a comment below, tell me where you're watching from or what time it is right now. When you've spent your whole life scraping by, debt doesn't feel like numbers anymore, it feels like a shadow that follows you everywhere. I worked 40 years in a machine shop, the kind of job where your hands tell the story better than your mouth ever could. My palms were cracked, my knees stiff, my back carrying every missed day off. I wasn't a rich man, but I was steady. And steady was how I paid for braces, prom dresses, and the down payment on a roof that didn't leak when my daughter was little. But as the years went on, steady stopped being enough. Every month, envelopes stacked on the counter like soldiers marching against me, utility bills, clinic notices, late fees from an insurance company that never seemed to cover what mattered. I'd open one, sigh, and set it aside with the others. The pile grew, but my paycheck never did. One night I sat at the kitchen table, staring at a medical bill for $600. Insurance had shrugged, like it always did, and left me holding the bag. I thought about skipping it. I thought about which light bulbs I could unscrew to shave a few dollars off the electric. Then I thought about how my wife, God rest her soul, used to say, "Pay what you owe, even if the world cheats you. That's how you sleep at night." So I wrote the check. My hands shook as I signed my name. The worst part wasn't the money itself, it was the way people looked at you when you didn't have enough. At the pharmacy, I slid my card across the counter, praying it wouldn't bounce for the prescription my doctor insisted I needed. The clerk, young, chewing gum like she owned the place, scanned it twice. The machine beeped. "Declined," she said flatly, loud enough for everyone in line to hear. I felt my face burn. My chest went tight, like everyone was staring. Maybe they weren't, but shame doesn't care about facts. I fumbled for cash, crumpled 20s I'd tucked away just in case. The clerk smirked like she'd won. I wanted to tell her, "I'm not a deadbeat. I've worked my whole life." But the words stuck in my throat. I just signed the receipt and left. Then came the night with Maddie and Tyler. They sat across from me at the dining table, Tyler with that smug grin plastered on his face like he'd practiced it in the mirror, Maddie quiet but sharp in the eyes. "Dad," she said finally, "we can't keep living like this. Tyler and I are working ourselves to the bone, and you still expect us to carry you." "Carry me?" I asked, my voice cracking more than I meant it to. "Who carried who when you were 10 years old and needed shoes every 6 months because you wouldn't stop growing?" "That was then," Tyler cut in. "This is now. You need to stop being a burden." The words landed harder than any punch I'd ever taken. My own daughter calling me a burden. I wanted to shout that I'd given her everything. That her college fund, her first car, every scraped-together vacation, had come from my callous hands. Instead, I just sat there, swallowing the fire rising in my chest. That night, I lay awake in the ugly recliner that had become my bed since they'd taken over the master bedroom. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the pipes rattle like they were laughing at me. I thought about my wife, about the promise I'd made at her bedside, take care of Maddie. No matter what. I thought about how far from that promise I'd fallen, how instead of protecting her, I was now the enemy in her eyes. That was the humiliation. Not the bills, not the bounce card, not even Tyler's smug grin. The real humiliation was realizing my daughter, the little girl I'd taught to ride a bike in the church parking lot, thought I was disposable. And so I made a vow to myself that night. If the world was going to call me a burden, if my own blood was going to treat me like a leftover bill, Then I was going to find a way to hold my line. Not by yelling. Not by begging. Not by surrendering. But by doing what I'd always done best, surviving. One small, stubborn step at a time. The night after Maddie shoved the utility bills across the table, I sat staring at that crumpled $5 bill she tossed at me like an insult. "Go buy a lottery ticket, Dad," she'd said. "Maybe you'll finally be useful." She laughed, but the laugh wasn't sweet. It was sharp. Tyler smirked and went back to the TV like the conversation was over. I kept that bill in my pocket all evening. Every time I reached for a tissue, every time I checked the clock, I felt it there, soft, worn, greasy at the edges from too many hands. Like me. At midnight I pulled it out and smoothed it flat on my knee. The faces on the bills never looked back at me, but this one seemed to dare me. So the next morning, I buttoned my coat, tugged my collar high against the Midwestern November wind, and walked out the front door. The cold bit harder than usual that morning. The kind of cold that finds every seam in your jacket and presses into your bones. My breath came in little ghosts that drifted away before I could catch them. 3 blocks down, Oakview Park was locked in frost. The pond carried a thin sheet of ice, cracked like a mirror that had been stepped on. A few stubborn geese shuffled along the edge, muttering to each other like old men who had seen too much winter. I envied them, at least they were together. My boots crunched over salt scattered on the sidewalk, the sound louder than the cars that passed. Every step felt like a decision: keep walking, keep moving, keep breathing. The notice about the electric bill peeked out from my coat pocket. I hadn't meant to bring it, but it followed me like a stray dog. I pushed it deeper, out of sight but never out of mind. The corner store bell chimed when I opened the door, the same cheerful chime it gave everyone, whether you came in for milk or for a miracle. Inside, warmth wrapped around me like a blanket that didn't quite fit. The smell of coffee burned too long on the hot plate, mixed with the faint sweetness of candy bars that hadn't moved in weeks. "Morning, Mr. Walker," Sam called from behind the counter. He was a kid in his 20s, hair always too neat, blue polo tucked in like he believed in rules. His name tag said Sam, but he always remembered mine. "Cold one," he added. "Getting colder," I answered like we'd rehearsed it. His smile was quick, then gone. He was already scanning the lotto machine, the bright lights flashing numbers and promises nobody believed but everyone wanted. I stood in front of the machine for a long time, staring at posters with slogans like, "Your chance at a better tomorrow." It all felt like a carnival game rigged to break your heart. But I wasn't here for hope. I was here for receipts. "1 quick pick in my daughter's name," I said clearly. "And 2 in mine." Sam raised his brows but didn't ask questions. He typed the printer word, and out came the slips, 3 little rectangles of paper that didn't look like much but carried more weight than I could admit. He slid the first one into a sleeve and scrawled her name on top, Madeline Walker. Then he printed 2 more, Walter Walker. Walter Walker. I handed him the $5 Maddie had given me, and then I pulled a 10 from my cracked leather wallet. My money. My decision. "Jackpot's big tonight," Sam said as he handed me the slips. "That's so?" I tucked one into my shirt pocket like a secret letter, the other 2 into my wallet beside my Medicare card and the old photo of my wife smiling at 30. "Bigger than trouble." He grinned. I gave him half a smile back. "Depends who's asking." The walk home felt sharper. The cold didn't let up, and the sky hung low like a dull blade. Street lights blinked awake, painting the cracked pavement in soft amber pools. I passed one window where a father bent over homework with his son, their heads almost touching. Another window glowed with a teenager stirring a pot while his mother checked her watch. Ordinary lives. Quiet lives. I wondered if mine would ever feel that way again. Back at the house, the warmth felt fake, like the thermostat was doing its best but the walls were too tired to hold it in. Tyler sprawled on the couch with a bag of chips balanced on his stomach. Maddie was scrubbing the counter like it had personally betrayed her. I laid the 3 slips on the coffee table. "Quick picks," I said. "Drawing at 8. Maddie's eyes narrowed at the tickets, then flicked to me. "We'll finally get some return on investment," she muttered, her smile sharp as glass. Tyler chuckled, a low, smug sound. I didn't reply. I just went upstairs, slipped the 2 tickets with my name into the inside pocket of my jacket, and patted it once like a man making sure his wallet hadn't fallen out. Not out of superstition. Out of survival. That night, the hours crawled. I read the same newspaper twice. Sorted the pills in my weekly box. Listened to the furnace kick on and off, like a heartbeat I didn't trust. By the time I came back downstairs, Maddie and Tyler were already glued to the TV, their eyes wide as the lottery host's plastic grin lit up the screen. The slips of paper lay on the coffee table, nestled between pizza coupons and unpaid bills. My daughter picked hers up with hands that trembled. And when the numbers started to fall, so did the walls of the life I'd been trapped inside. 8 o'clock came like a drumbeat. The TV was already on, volume cranked higher than usual, the lottery host grinning in his perfect suit, teeth polished like a salesman who never worked a day of overtime. Maddie sat on the edge of the couch, her knees bouncing, her eyes glued to the screen. Tyler leaned back, smirking, arms spread like a king surveying his new kingdom. And me? I sat in the old recliner in the corner, jacket still on, my hand resting casually over the inside pocket where my tickets lived. The ones with my name. The house smelled of leftover pizza and nervous sweat. The kind of night where even the walls seemed to be waiting. The host began the ritual. "Tonight's jackpot, $35 million! His voice rang out like a preacher promising salvation. The first ball rolled out. Maddie gasped. "That's mine!" She jabbed her finger at her slip. Second ball. She squealed, looking at Tyler with wild eyes. 2 for 2. "Oh my God!" Third ball. Tyler laughed, shaking his head in disbelief. "This is it. Babe, this is it." Fourth ball. Maddie clutched her ticket so tightly the paper crinkled. "Dad, can you believe this? We're millionaires!" I said nothing. Just leaned back, letting the host's voice echo through the room while my daughter trembled with joy she hadn't earned yet. Fifth ball. The air went electric. Maddie was crying now, her smile split wide across her face. And then the final number dropped. Her ticket matched. Every single one. The room exploded. Maddie screamed, Tyler shot to his feet, knocking the chip bag to the floor. They hugged, jumped, shouted, spinning in circles like kids on Christmas morning. 35 million! Do you hear me? Tyler bellowed, his face red with triumph. Maddie sobbed into his chest. We're rich, Ty. We're rich! I watched them, quiet. It was a strange kind of silence, the kind where your heartbeat slows instead of quickens. Like standing in the eye of a storm while everything around you flies apart. Because I knew that while my daughter's hands shook with that one ticket, 2 others rested safe against my chest, carrying the exact same numbers. The truth no one else in that room understood, yet. Tyler finally noticed me, sitting calm while the living room shook with their celebration. What's wrong with you, old man? He barked. You realize what this means? We don't have to scrape by anymore. No more bills piling up. No more. No more Dad living under our roof. Maddie cut in, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. Her voice wasn't cruel in that moment. It was sharp with adrenaline, with the kind of giddy cruelty money whispers in your ear before you even touch it. Don't say that, I murmured, almost to myself. But she did. Louder. I mean it. We don't need you here. We don't need your pity, your little paychecks, your disappointment every time you look at me. The words landed harder than any eviction notice ever could. Tyler puffed his chest. We'll handle this from here, Walt. We'll get the lawyers, the trust funds, the interviews. You can, fade out. Quietly. I stood slowly, my knees creaking like old doors. I wasn't angry. I wasn't shouting. I just felt tired. Congratulations, I said softly. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. You've won yourself a storm. Maddie looked at me, confusion flickering across her face for half a second. Then she turned back to Tyler, burying herself in his victory. I slipped upstairs, the celebration echoing behind me, their laughter, their chants of "We're rich, we're rich." In my room, I hung up my jacket, patted the inside pocket, and pulled out the 2 slips of paper. My name. My numbers. My truth. I laid them flat on the nightstand, side by side. They looked ordinary. Harmless. Just paper. But they were the kind of paper that could break families, ruin friendships, and turn love into a ledger. Downstairs, Maddie and Tyler's voices rose and fell in waves of excitement. They were already dreaming of cars, vacations, houses with gates. I sat in the dark, staring at those tickets, and whispered to no one. This storm, it belongs to me. The night after the numbers fell, the house didn't sleep. Maddie and Tyler stayed downstairs until dawn, shouting over each other, sketching castles in the air with words like mansions, sports cars, vacations. They didn't notice the clock strike midnight, or 1 or 2. They didn't notice me sitting on the stairs in the shadows, listening. Their voices carried through the thin walls. First thing, we're out of this dump. I'm buying a Tesla. Maybe 2. We'll get on TV, oh, imagine the interviews. Every sentence stacked bricks between us. Bricks mortared with money that hadn't even cleared yet. By sunrise, Maddie was pacing the kitchen, her hair a mess, eyes bloodshot but blazing. Tyler had a notebook open, scrawling numbers like a man pretending to be an accountant. We'll need a lawyer, babe, he said. Somebody who knows trusts, investments, the whole deal. Maddie nodded, chewing her lip. We'll call first thing. But Dad. She glanced toward the staircase, where I stood, silent. He can't be part of this. Tyler smirked. Don't worry. I'll handle him. I walked in slow, poured myself a cup of coffee like it was any other morning. The pot was half empty, bitter from sitting too long. You're up early, I said, voice steady. Maddie wouldn't meet my eyes. Tyler didn't bother trying. Listen, Walt, he began, leaning back in his chair like the king of some paper kingdom. We're grateful you bought the ticket. Really. But this is our future. You don't know what to do with money like this. My grip tightened on the mug, but I kept my tone calm. I've spent a lifetime knowing what to do when money's scarce. You'd be surprised what that teaches a man. Maddie snapped, her voice sharp from exhaustion and adrenaline. Stop acting like this is about you. You wouldn't understand, Dad. This is bigger than paying bills or fixing roofs. We're talking about a whole new life. Our life. The "our" cut deeper than anything else. I set the mug down carefully, afraid my hands might betray the anger I refused to show. I want you to enjoy your life, I said. But don't mistake excitement for wisdom. Money doesn't change who you are, it just makes you louder. Tyler scoffed. Spare us the sermon. We don't need advice. We need space. That word hung heavy. Space. A polite word that really meant eviction. I went back upstairs, each step creaking under the weight of what I already knew. In my room, the 2 slips with my name waited on the nightstand. Silent, patient, more honest than the voices downstairs. I slid them back into the inside pocket of my jacket. Close to my chest, where they belong. Then I opened my drawer and pulled out an old notebook. The one I'd once used to track overtime hours, bills, repairs. That night I wrote a new list. Quiet over chaos. Proof over shouting. Patience over pride. I underlined the last one twice. Patience. Because storms don't announce themselves when they're passing through. They let you know afterward, when you see what's still standing. Later that week, the house filled with the smell of printer ink and fried food as Maddie and Tyler printed out dream homes, from real estate listings and circled cars and magazines. I stayed upstairs most of the time, walking only when I needed to, eating at odd hours to avoid the spectacle. They barely noticed. Once, Maddie cornered me in the hall, her face thinner from too many restless nights. Dad, she said, you should start thinking about moving out. We'll help you with something. Maybe a little condo. Something small. Her voice trembled, but not with guilt. With impatience. I looked at her, really looked, and saw the girl I'd once carried on my shoulders at county fairs, the girl who used to laugh until she hiccuped. And then I saw the woman standing before me, sharper, harder, already seduced by a life that hadn't even begun. Don't worry about me, I said quietly. I've always known how to stand on my own 2 feet. That night, I lay awake listening to them downstairs. Their laughter, their arguments about which cars to buy first, their promises to each other about never going back to that boring life. Every sound was another door closing. I pulled out the tickets one more time, holding them under the dim lamp. My name. My numbers. My quiet truth in black ink. And I whispered, when the storm hits, let me still know who I am. It didn't happen all at once. It never does. First it was little things. My coffee mug disappeared from the kitchen and reappeared in a box by the garage. My tools were shoved into a crate labeled junk. The chair I'd sat in for 20 years was suddenly taking up space. Then came the whispers. Late at night, when they thought I was asleep, I heard Maddie's voice carrying up the vents. Dad's not going to understand. He'll drag us down. We can't let him ruin this. Tyler answered, his voice smug, sure. He'll fight it. Then we make him leave before he tries. Each word landed like a hammer against an already cracked wall. The day it happened, the house smelled like bleach. Maddie was scrubbing the counters again, furiously, like she could wash me out of her life with enough elbow grease. Tyler stood behind her, arms crossed, smirk steady. Dad, Maddie said, her voice trembling but her chin high. It's time. You can't stay here anymore. I set down the grocery bag in my hand, a loaf of bread, some apples, instant coffee. Ordinary things for an ordinary life. This is my house, I said quietly. Not a shout. Not a plea. Just fact. Maddie shook her head. Not anymore. We're starting fresh. We need the space, the freedom. Tyler stepped in, voice sharp. Look, Walt, we'll help you find somewhere else. Maybe even set you up with a few thousand. But you can't be here when the lawyers, the reporters, the bank people come. This is our story now. For a long moment, I just stood there. The kitchen clock ticked, loud in the silence between us. I looked at my daughter. Her hands red from scrubbing. Her eyes wild with fear and excitement. My little girl, who once cried over broken toys, now willing to break her father in the name of a future that wasn't even built yet. And I looked at Tyler. Arrogant. Entitled. A man who had never paid a bill on time without someone else's help, now acting like he was king of the world. Something in me went still. You think money makes you free, I said softly. But it just puts a bigger chain around your neck. Maddie's face twisted, half fury, half guilt. Stop trying to make me feel bad, Dad. Just go. So I went. I walked upstairs, my knees aching, the sound of their voices fading behind me. In my room, I pulled out my old duffel bag. I packed slow. A couple shirts. My shaving kit. The photo of my wife, Marie, forever 30 in that picture, smiling into the sunlight like she knew how to survive storms. And of course, the 2 slips of paper. My tickets. My proof. I slid them into the fireproof box I kept under the bed, locked it, and tucked it under my arm like a man carrying his last bit of dignity. When I came back downstairs, Maddie was crying quietly, head bent. Tyler wrapped an arm around her, whispering promises of houses and cars and interviews. Neither of them looked at me as I opened the front door. The air outside was sharp, clean. It smelled like winter coming on fast. I stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind me with a soft click. On the sidewalk, I stood for a moment, just breathing. I had nowhere to go. No plan. Just a duffel, a box, and a spine that refused to bend. Across the street, a neighbor raked leaves into neat piles. He glanced at me, then back at his work, pretending not to notice the man with a bag standing alone. That was fine. I didn't need witnesses. I walked to the bus stop. My breath puffed in front of me. My hands tightened on the strap of the duffel. The fireproof box pressed against my side, solid, heavy, alive with secrets. On the ride into town, I watched the streets roll past. Kids in hoodies kicking at piles of leaves. A woman hauling groceries, her arms straining against plastic bags ready to split. Men standing outside the diner smoking in silence. Ordinary lives. Hard lives. The kind I knew. And I thought, let them chase their castles. I'll settle for ground that doesn't move beneath my feet. I rented a room that night above a laundromat. The walls smelled of soap and mildew, the radiator groaned like it wanted to quit. But it was quiet. It was mine. I set the box down on the rickety dresser, laid Marie's photo beside it, and whispered. They threw me out, love. But they don't know. They don't know what I'm carrying. The radiator clanged once, like a drumbeat. I sat on the edge of the bed, the springs protesting, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself breathe without looking over my shoulder. I didn't know how the fight would come. But I knew this, I wasn't done. Not yet. The room above the laundromat was small, but it didn't judge me. The radiator hissed and clanged at odd hours, the carpet carried stains older than I was, and the window gave me a view of a neon sign that blinked open all night. But it was mine. Nobody rolled their eyes at me here. Nobody told me I was in the way. I unpacked slowly, like a man laying bricks. One shirt on a hanger. One book on the table. Marie's photo by the bed. And finally, the fireproof box on the dresser, sitting heavy as a beating heart. That box didn't just hold paper. It held the truth. My proof. My lifeline. Every night before sleep I touched it once, the way a man might touch a cross or a flag, not for luck, but for certainty. The first days blurred together. I walked down to the corner diner each morning, ordered black coffee and eggs, and sat by the window with my notebook. At first, the waitress called me, Sir? By the third morning, she called me, Walt. By the fifth, she didn't bother with words at all, just set the mug down with a nod, like she understood I wasn't there for company. I filled page after page with lists. Not dreams. Not castles. Just anchors. Pay the clinic bill. Buy a decent coat before winter really sets in. Find a chair that doesn't wobble. Keep receipts. Stay boring. I underlined the last one twice. Because boring keeps you alive. Meanwhile, Maddie's world spun faster. I didn't need to be there to know it. Word spread quick in a town like ours. By the second week, whispers floated in the diner. Did you hear? His daughter's the big winner. 35 million. Can you imagine? She threw him out, too. Poor old man. I stirred my coffee slowly, pretending not to hear, but every word hit its mark. I wanted to shout, the ticket has my name on it. My money. My proof. But shouting is a young man's game. I'd learned patience. One afternoon, I walked past a thrift store with a crooked sign in the window, used furniture, cheap but sturdy. Inside, the place smelled like dust and old varnish. A man with tired eyes showed me a desk with a scar across its surface, and a straight-backed chair that creaked but held firm. They're ugly, he said apologetically. I don't need pretty, I told him. I need something that lasts. I carried them up the narrow stairs one at a time, stopping twice for my knees to catch up. When I set the desk under the window, I felt something settle inside me. Like I was laying foundation. At night, I sat at that desk, the city humming outside, and wrote more lists. Lists of what I could fix. Lists of what I had to endure. Lists that kept me steady. By the second week, Amelia called. She was the lawyer I'd met years back at the plant picnic, sharp as a tack even in jeans and a t-shirt. I trusted her then. I trusted her now. Walter, she said on the phone, her voice clipped but kind. You need to be ready. If Maddie or her husband tries to claim the winnings under her name, we'll need to walk in with proof. Calm. Prepared. No drama. I've got the tickets, I told her. And a witness. Good, she said. We'll rehearse everything. You'll meet me at the claims office. You hand them your ID and your ticket. No speeches. Just facts. Her steadiness was a kind of music I hadn't heard in months. Walter, she added softer now, don't let them pull you into noise. Stay boring. That's how we win. I almost laughed. Boring, the one thing I'd always been good at. Nights were the hardest. The laundromat downstairs roared with dryers until midnight. After that, the building went still, and the silence pressed against me. That's when the doubts crept in. What if they twist it? What if Maddie lies? What if Tyler spins a story people want to believe? I'd roll over, stare at Marie's photo, and whisper, "Help me hold the line." Her smile, frozen in that old snapshot, was all the answer I got. But it was enough. Then, one evening, Nora from the apartment next door knocked on my door with a mug in each hand. "Chilly," she said simply. "Made too much." I blinked, surprised, and took the mug. Steam curled up into the hall light. "It's not fancy," she added, "but it'll keep a man warm." We stood in the doorway sipping chili, looking out at the alley below like it was a front porch. She told me about the snowplow driver who always took the corner too fast. I told her about a car I once drove that rattled like a tambourine. We didn't trade last names. It felt like respect. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like a man exiled. I felt like a man starting over. By the third week, my life had rhythm again. Coffee at the diner. Work on lists at the desk. A walk in the cold to remind myself the world is bigger than money. Chilly with Nora when she had too much. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't rich. But it was steady. And steady beats chaos every time. I kept the fireproof box in the closet, draped with an old coat, hidden the way old men hide things, in plain sight, but with a layer of dust for camouflage. Each night I touched it once and whispered, "Not yet. But soon." The morning of the claim, I dressed like a man going to church, not war. A plain coat, shoes I'd polished the night before, my old shirt pressed as best as an iron from a thrift store could manage. Nothing loud. Nothing proud. Just steady. The fireproof box sat on the dresser, humming in its own way. Inside it, 2 slips of paper that didn't look like much, but weighed more than any gold I'd ever seen. I slid them into a folder, along with my ID, and tucked it under my arm. Before I left, I touched Marie's photo. "Wish me boring," I whispered. The bus ride downtown was crowded with strangers feeding themselves into another Tuesday. Men in work boots, women with tired eyes, kids clutching backpacks. No one knew what I carried in my bag. No one cared. And that suited me fine. At each stop, people swiped their cards, the city swallowing them one by one. I sat near the front, steadying my breath, feeling the paper inside my folder press against me like a heartbeat. When we finally pulled up in front of the Capitol Center, I saw Amelia waiting in the lobby. She stood tall, folder in her hand, her posture sharp but her smile kind. "You're early," she said. "Better than late," I replied. She nodded once. "Let's get it done." The lobby was wide and echoing, with ceilings so high they made you feel small on purpose. A potted plant the size of a tree hunched in the corner. The guard by the elevator barely looked at us, though his shoulders told me he saw everything. We didn't speak much as we rode up. Amelia's pen clicked quietly in her hand, once, twice, the sound of a mind already rehearsing. When the doors opened, the hallway was ordinary. Beige walls. A row of doors. A water cooler humming. No balloons. No cameras. No parade. Exactly the way I wanted it. The clerk behind the glass wall looked up, smiled politely. A professional smile, warm enough to make you relax, thin enough to fade when business began. "Next," he said. Amelia nudged me forward. "Mr. Walter Walker," she said firmly. "Here to claim." I handed over the ticket like it was nothing but paper. Amelia slid my ID across. The clerk scanned, typed, checked. The printer hummed once. "Congratulations," he said, though it sounded more like "transaction complete." I signed where they pointed. Amelia murmured the words I'd practiced with her: lump sum, federal withholding, privacy election, no comment. Each stroke of my pen felt like nailing a board into a foundation. Quiet. Necessary. Permanent. And then it was done. The clerk slid a receipt back to me. Just one piece of paper. Ordinary. But it carried the weight of $35 million, condensed into a line of numbers and a stamp. I folded it carefully, slipped it into the folder, and buttoned the flap. In the elevator down, Amelia tapped the folder once with her finger. "Guardrails," she said softly. "We'll put them up right away. You'll get the deposit in a few days. Until then, stay invisible." I nodded. Invisible was my specialty. Outside, the air smelled different. Not of money, money doesn't smell. It was lighter. Easier. For the first time in months, I noticed the sound of the city without feeling like it was pressing against me. A busker strumming his guitar. A child laughing as her mother tugged her along. The clatter of a food cart. Life, unbothered by my secret. At the bank, we set up the account in the trust's name. A woman with gentle eyes clicked her stapler with soft finality. "This account will distribute evenly each month, like a paycheck," she explained. A steady drip instead of a flood. The kind of rhythm I could live with. I signed again. Amelia slid the papers into neat stacks. "No revenge purchases," she reminded me, half stern, half teasing. "I don't even like shopping," I told her. She smiled, the corner of her mouth softening. "Then you're ahead of the game." By dusk, I was back in my little apartment above the laundromat. Nora knocked on my door with 2 mugs in hand. "Chilly again," she said. "And no, I'm not running a restaurant." I laughed, taking the mug. The steam fogged my glasses. We stood at the top of the stairs, sipping, the street below quiet. Snowflakes drifted lazily, trying on the idea of winter without committing yet. She told me about the neighbors who sang on Sundays, whether anyone wanted them to or not. I told her about a car I once owned that rattled so loud over 55 it sounded like a tambourine. We didn't talk about money. And that silence felt like mercy. That night I sat at my desk, folder beside me. I opened my notebook and wrote 2 columns. Quiet. A doctor who listens. A neighbor who knocks. A chair that doesn't wobble. Hiding. Lies. Locked doors. Waiting for footsteps that never come. I put the pen down, leaned back in my chair, and looked out the window. Between the buildings, the lake shimmered, just a sliver, reminding me there's always something bigger than your story waiting 2 blocks away. For the first time in weeks, I slept without checking the door twice. And in my dreams, there were no lotteries, no arguments, no shouting. Just Marie's laugh, and the sound of a latch clicking shut the way it's supposed to. The money didn't arrive like fireworks. It arrived like weather, announced, charted, then suddenly there, changing the air. Amelia called at 10 sharp. "Deposit posted," she said. By 10:04, I felt my shoulders shift down, as if they'd been waiting weeks for permission to relax. For one breath, I allowed myself to believe in peace. Then the storm found me. The first knock came that evening. Hard. Impatient. A rhythm that belonged to men who didn't ask permission. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. On the plate, chili from Nora, cornbread she insisted wasn't fancy. I set the fork down and stepped quietly to the door. Through the peephole, a man with a microphone, a cameraman already angling for the best shot. "Mr. Walker," he shouted. "Care to comment on your daughter's claim? 35 million! The town's talking." I didn't answer. Just stood there, listening to the hum of the camera, the shuffle of feet. Nora's voice floated up from her apartment. "No comment means no comment. Good night." Her door slammed. The crew lingered another minute, then left, their voices fading into the cold. I slid the bolt, leaned against the door, and whispered, "Not yet." The letters came next. Thick envelopes, legal stock, names I recognized in the return addresses. Maddie's lawyer. Tyler's lawyer. Each one said the same thing in a different font: "You owe us. You promised. We deserve." Amelia read them with the calm of a surgeon. "They're fishing," she said. "We'll file responses. Short. Boring. Nothing dramatic. But they'll keep coming," I said. She looked at me over her glasses. "Then we'll keep saying no. Facts, not noise." Her steadiness was a shield I leaned on more than I admitted. The calls came after that. First from old coworkers. "Hey, Walt, heard the news. Got a little venture going, vending machines, influencers, guaranteed money. You in?" "No," I said. Then from old acquaintances. "Brother, just float me $5,000 until my settlement comes through. You know I'll pay you back." "No," I said again. Every no felt heavier than the last. But I reminded myself, no is a word you can say without becoming a villain. Then Maddie came. It was a Saturday. Snow falling soft, the street muffled in white. I just poured coffee when the knock rattled the door. I opened it to see her standing there, face pale, eyes swollen. Tyler loomed behind, jaw tight, scanning the hall like he was casing it. "Dad," she whispered. For a second, she looked 12 again, late for school, begging me to write a note. Then her chin lifted. "We just want to talk." Tyler stepped forward, palms up. "We can handle this like family. Split it fair." Behind them, in the idling car, a reporter sat with a notepad ready. I set my jaw. "Not a good time. Not a good place." Maddie's eyes flickered with something like shame. Tyler's narrowed with calculation. "You're making a mistake," he said. I stepped back, put my foot against the door. "No. You are. You brought a reporter to a family talk. That tells me everything I need to know." I closed the door. My hands shook. My heart didn't. By Monday, Amelia had filed a motion. "They're threatening exposure," she said. "We'll keep a record. We'll be firm. We'll be boring." "Boring's my favorite flavor," I told her. She almost smiled. The lawsuit landed 2 weeks later. A knock at dawn. A courier in a windbreaker, eyes tired. "Sorry, sir. Just the job." He handed me the envelope, thick and heavy. Notice of intent to sue. I thanked him. He looked surprised. "You'd be surprised how much of this job is weather," he muttered before walking off. Inside, the words bang pots, constructive trust, family entitlement, unjust enrichment. I called Amelia. "Standard bluff," she said briskly. "We'll respond. We'll attach the receipts, the notarized statement from the clerk, the voicemail where they threaten you. We won't flinch." "We don't flinch," I echoed. My voice didn't shake. But the storm didn't let up. Reporters loitered by the laundromat, pretending to buy soda while waiting for me to appear. Cars slowed by my building, windows tinted, faces watching. And then the headline hit. "Local man believed to be winner." My name, my alley, my daughter's name, all in black and white. The comment section lit up like a fire. "He stole from his own daughter. Selfish old man. My cousin says he promised to share." Nora slid the paper under my door with a sticky note, "Don't read the comments." I didn't. But the headline was enough to sour the air. Not all attention was ugly. A neighbor knocked with a casserole, hot from the oven. "No reason," she said, handing it over. "I bake when it snows. You looked like someone who eats." I laughed, and for a moment the storm outside the walls felt far away. But then came the freeze. At the checkout line, my card declined. Twice. The clerk, a kid with a lip ring, frowned at the screen. "Says declined, sir?" His voice was soft, embarrassed for me. I put the bread back, smiled faintly. "Machines can be dramatic." Outside, I called Amelia. "They got an emergency order," she said before I finished. Ex part. Temporary freeze. Judge must have been hungry. It'll thaw. Just 2 days. 2 days. 2 days of carrying cash. 2 days of breathing steady. 2 days of remembering, money's a storm, not a shelter. The hearing was quick, sharp, almost surgical. Opposing counsel thundered about family fairness, waving big words like weapons. Morality. Equity. Obligation. Amelia stood, calm as stone, her sentences short and true. The ticket bears my client's name. He purchased it with his money. We have the receipt. We have the notarized statement. We have a voicemail where the plaintiffs threaten him. Facts, not speculation. The judge adjusted his glasses, looked at the papers, and underlined something twice. Then, in a voice that carried finality, the freeze is dissolved. Family disappointment is not legal entitlement. His gavel tapped once. Not a bang. Just a quiet period at the end of a loud sentence. When it was over, I walked outside with Amelia. The air cut sharp and clean, the snow glittering like glass. You kept the line, she said. I wanted to do something dramatic, I admitted. She smiled faintly. We all do. But we eat almonds instead. Her steadiness was a lifeline. My silence was my weapon. The storm would keep coming, I knew. But storms break, eventually. And I was still standing. The lawsuit fizzled the way storms do, loud at first, then nothing but puddles. One morning Amelia called, her voice carrying that clipped calm I'd grown to trust. Case dismissed, she said. With prejudice. The words weren't trumpets. They were a stamp. Firm. Irrevocable. I thanked her, though the words felt too small. She chuckled softly. You built the guardrails, Walt. I just handed you the drill. Then the line went quiet, and just like that, the war was over. I didn't celebrate. No champagne. No victory lap. No statements to reporters. Instead, I wrote 2 checks, one to the clinic for a balance insurance had shrugged at, and one to the library with a note, 4 chairs that don't wobble. I walked them down to the mailbox, raised the red flag, and stood there a moment in the cold, feeling more relief than triumph. The world didn't clap. The world didn't notice. And I preferred it that way. In the weeks after, life began to settle around me like a coat that finally fit. The laundromat's hum became background music. Nora knocked twice a week with mugs of chili or stew. We invented a ritual. She'd leave a bag of rock salt at my door. I'd fix the hinge on her back gate. Small trades. Honest trades. At the diner, the waitress started setting my mug down before I Saturday. Morning, Walt. She'd say, no fuss. Just fact. I bought a used truck older than Tyler's ambition. It rattled but started on the first turn, like a loyal dog. With it, I picked up a lawn mower, a bookshelf a man had built with more sincerity than skill, and a rocking chair sturdy enough to become an heirloom if someone loved it long enough. Each piece wasn't just furniture. It was proof. Proof that I could build again. Quietly. Maddie came once more. She didn't bring Tyler this time. Just herself, wrapped in a coat too thin for winter, her shoulders hunched. We sat at the diner, coffee steaming between us. For a long time, she said nothing. Just stirred sugar into her cup, watching it dissolve. Finally, she whispered, I thought money would fix me. I stayed quiet. Sometimes silence is the only safe reply. Tears welled in her eyes. I'm sorry, Dad. For all of it. I wanted to reach across the table, but I didn't. Not yet. Some bridges take more than one plank. So I just nodded. Coffee's warm. Let's start there. It wasn't forgiveness. Not fully. But it was something. A beginning. Spring arrived one drip at a time. Snow melted into the gutters. The lake 2 blocks away loosened its ice with a sigh. Neighbors pulled chairs onto porches, swapping nods that meant we survived another winter. I sat on my own porch, 2 rocking chairs now, one for me, one for whoever wanted to sit a while. Sometimes Nora. Sometimes nobody. The heir didn't care either way. The library sent a letter, printed on a dot matrix dinosaur of a machine. Thank you for the chairs. I touched the paper like a pulse. Proof that small things done right sometimes write you back. One afternoon, I walked to the park with Marie's photo in my pocket. I sat on a bench, held her face to the sun, and whispered the phrase she taught me. Look at that. Kids chase bubbles that popped before they hit the ground. A man strummed a guitar off-key but with enough heart to make you forgive it. A dog barked at a pigeon and lost. Look at that, Marie, I said again. And I smiled. At night I wrote 2 lists. Petty. Call the paper. Sue for sanctions. Buy a car just to prove I can. Free. Show up for coffee. Fix the gate. Pay the clinic. Learn the names of the men who plow the alley. I put a check beside free. Then I dug into a bag of almonds and ate 5 on purpose. The wind shifted outside, chimes singing a tune no one asked for. Spring had sent a note ahead. By summer, life sparkled in its own boring way. Kids with chalk drew maps to places their feet already knew. The library forgave late fees because it was hot. Neighbors waved, not because of headlines, but because porches are made for it. At home, I kept 3 folders on my desk: quiet, health, house. All heavy enough to matter, light enough to lift with one hand. Inside the cabinet, a list still hung on a nail. It started with no revenge purchases. Now it read like an old joke I kept telling myself because it still worked. One night, sitting in the ugly chair that had somehow earned its keep, I whispered goodnight to the picture of my wife, to the list on the wall, to the street outside, to the lake that kept time for me. And to the man I had been, the one who once thought money was a finish line. Then I closed my eyes and slept steady, like a man who'd finally learned the trick. Do small things right on purpose. In the morning, the kettle fussed. Shoes by the door waited. The latch clicked shut behind me with that sound that lands in the chest like a promise. The world was unremarkable. And therefore, perfect.